volunteer for the Mountain Bothies Association. Bothy, whenever I can. A little less now, I have my boy, but whenever I can. Now, I've heard some weird shit, and I've seen some too, and most of it can be put right down to overactive imaginations and old Mother Nature liking her little jokes. But there's one story I want to share because, Lord knows, I've never made any sense of it. It started without much in the way of hassle. It was a Saturday. My wife was reading to my boy while I was making us sandwiches, and when my phone rang in the other room. Jane from the NBA, my wife called. Wonder what she's after. I draped the dishcloth over my shoulder as I headed out. Mike, I'm so sorry to bother you at home. Jane always sounded rushed, but this was bad even for her. We're not sure yet, but it could be an emergency. The story wasn't unusual, I thought. Some young couple had taken up an autumn walking holiday and decided to spend a wet night in one of our bothies. Jane related they'd taken one look at the place and hightailed it back to the nearest village to call the NBA. Completely destroyed were the words they used. What, like a ruin? I scratched my stubble. Scotland could get pretty stormy. It wouldn't be the first time a roof had caved in. I heard a rush of static as Jane sighed. I'm not sure. They didn't go into much detail. In fact, they said we should take it off our list and board it up. When you spend a lot of time down the pub with hikers and walkers and campers, you hear your share of stories. Some are outlandish, some are plausible, but no matter what, there's always a certain kind of person who lets it all get to their head. Superstitious folk, I call them. Don't worry, Jane, I'll head up tomorrow and take a look. Probably a bunch of kids trashing the place. Now, I suspect a lot of you reading this are maybe the superstitious type. You get some story in your head, and the next thing you know, you're seeing what's and whatnots in every dark corner. I'd spent half my life on moors and fens and hills. Nothing scarier than an overactive imagination. I set off after a late breakfast the next morning. The Bothy was a fair old trek from my house. It would have taken 3 hours in the best car in the nicest weather, but it was setting up with a nice drizzle when I left, so it took closer to 4.5 in my faithful Land Rover. Even with that, the Bothy wasn't close to any roads, so it took another walk uphill on the Scottish terrain with poor visibility to get to the actual place, by which time the sky was darkening to a stormy grey.
Oh, lovely.
The light was still good enough when I got there to know that Jane hadn't been wrong to call me out. I could see a gaping mouth in the roof, wide enough to fit 4 men standing together. More than that, the window closest to me was smashed, and some idiot had left the door open. The wind whistled round me. It wasn't hard to imagine that a particularly nasty storm had come in from the coast of an evening. I wasn't concerned with how it had happened, though, just what in the blazes I could do to patch it up. The stuff in my pack wouldn't be enough, that was for sure, and no way I could spend the night there. The only thing for it would be to see how bad the damage really was, hike back to the car, head down to the village, and decide what I need the next day. Drawing up to the Bothy, my frown deepened. The stonework on the outside was damaged, but for the life of me, I couldn't work out how a storm would have caused it. There were great ruddy gouges in the brick, like it'd been lashed by the world's strongest branch. I decided the walls were probably old and the wind had knocked out some structural issues. So when I went inside and saw stuff that didn't make sense for a storm, I couldn't make head or tail of it. The door had been torn clear off its hinges, not left open. It was against the opposite wall with more of those gouges in it. I'd installed doors like it before. They were solid and they weren't easy to take off or chuck around. The walls weren't all scraped up, but they had weird black lines on them. In some places, it looked like writing or drawing. In other places, more like streaks of soot from a fire. I've seen stuff made by people and stuff made by nature. Those marks were the first things I ever saw where I couldn't make the distinction. It was the rabbits that got me, though.
What do you mean?
All piled up in the corner. I know hunters sometimes come around here and maybe a dog catches a rabbit or two, but they didn't seem to have died from having their throats slit or being shot. Most of them looked like they'd been stomped on. Kids, I thought to myself. Probably a group of local ones who thought it'd be funny to make the place look like something out of a horror movie. Well, I'd go to the village, I'd ask around, and if I could catch the buggers, I'd have them out here cleaning it up with me, and a walloping for hurting animals. As I turned back, I thought I saw a flash of something dark in the corner. It was only a glimpse. Not even a nanosecond, but I could have sworn I saw a dark figure. When I turned to look properly, though, it was just a dark corner, some junk in it, no figure. Just a couple of old wooden beams, a few old beer cans, and those weird black streaks. I took a couple of seconds to check, trying to calm my pounding heart, but in the end I just decided to leave before I let it get to me. I whistled a light tune as I headed out the doorway, swinging my mag light at my side. I don't remember what, probably just whatever notes I could string together.
Is that a headlight?
Yeah, it's a torch.
Oh, just a normal torch.
Yeah. Years out in the countryside had taught me the worst thing to do is let yourself get the creeps. I was feeling a little riled up as I headed back to my car. The dead rabbits, the broken walls, it wasn't a pretty scene. Maybe having a son made me a little soft, but I felt a bit ill. I'll admit it since you don't know me, but I was glad I wouldn't be there in the dark. I was almost feeling better by the time I got back to the path proper and headed round a bend. By the time I was a good ways down the road, I was feeling chipper enough. I didn't think a thing of it when I saw the jogger. In hindsight, there wasn't much of a reason to assume he was a jogger. He didn't have any kit on and the wind was whipping up a nice autumn chill, but he had his back to me. And I couldn't really think what he was wearing. It sounds strange, doesn't it? I'm sitting here racking my head trying to remember because it isn't like me, but every time I think of a way to describe this bloke, it kind of falls short. I couldn't tell you his height or weight or anything really. He mustn't have looked too funny though, because I had no problem yelling out, "Hey mate, you all right there?" and hurrying my pace to meet him. The terrain was rough and he wasn't on the path. He was a little way off overlooking a short cliff, which the path took a winding route down. I figured he was enjoying the view or maybe lost. Either way, the guy didn't turn. He didn't acknowledge me at all. The wind was really getting into it, whistling something fierce around my ears. It seemed likely he couldn't hear me. It was when I got within maybe 15 foot of him that things began to feel off. For a moment, I was actually sort of glad someone else was out here. I'd freak him out telling him about the bothy and maybe give him a ride to the warm village pub. There wasn't anything off about him, but my blood was pounding something terrible. I could feel my skin go colder than the wind warranted. The wind. When you're out in Scotland, you get used to it. It becomes white noise, so persistent you never hear it, not really, but I stopped dead in my tracks and I listened to the wind whistling. Literally, the same tune I was whistling. In fact, when I walked out that building, it was that tune that I couldn't remember. It was as if it knew I'd put the pieces together, and then the wind died. I stared at the man on the ledge. He still hadn't turned. The figure began to turn around. Not fast. Not like he was about to lunge. It was slow, measured. The back of his head began to twist around. Very gentle and smooth. Only his other muscles weren't moving. His neck muscles didn't seem to be changing, and when his head got far enough, it kept turning. I saw the edge of his cheekbone and realised I was moments from seeing his face. I booked it. I ran right past him, eyes screwed shut and praying to God I didn't go charging right off the cliff. I ran for as long as I could with my eyes shut, and when I opened them, I kept running, keeping my vision locked on the ground in front. I dropped the mag light somewhere, I couldn't remember when. Slowed to a jog. I'd covered a fair old way, and that person, for lack of a better word, hadn't shown any signs of moving. The car wasn't too far away. But when I reached the bottom of the cliff, I glanced behind me. My stomach clenched when I saw the summit. The light was weak, but not so gone that I couldn't see the figure silhouetted against the grey clouds. It proved I hadn't been followed, if nothing else, but it was facing me. It was looking right at me. I couldn't see any features from this distance, but I could just make out the angle of the head and shoulders. They were undeniably turned towards me with the stillness a cat gets when it's seen its prey. I remembered the rabbits with their crushed bodies and glistening insides. I didn't let myself dwell on the image. I didn't look back, I kept going. I ran so hard that I almost ran into my car because I didn't dare look ahead. When I touched the metal and heard the click of the unlock in response to my key, I cried with relief. I didn't wipe the tears away until I was well down the road, going as fast as I could manage without risking a crash. I didn't look in the rearview mirror either. Not until I reached a junction and I had to slow down. Of course, it was now pretty dark, so I couldn't see much out of it, but I still stared at it for a good few seconds just to check there was nothing untowards out there. There wasn't. Just quiet road, the shapes of hills and fields. It would have been beautiful if my heart still wasn't going as fast as a rabbit. I was still looking when I saw the dark figure out of the corner of my eye again. It wasn't behind me. I had just enough time to register it was in the middle of the road before my car hit it at about 50 miles an hour.
Oh, like I know what you did last summer.
No time to brake, no time to scream. It rolled up the bonnet and over the windshield, and in that second, in a split second, I saw its face. The eyes were a little too big, the nose too long and too flat, the teeth... Oh, God, the teeth. Angles that were just impossible, and far too many of them. The worst bit wasn't all that, though. It was the smile. Those terrible teeth were displayed with a smile that was cartoonish in its wideness, like the sort of semicircle a kid would draw. There was no fear, no dread of the crash, just a smile. That's vile. It was a thing masquerading as a person, but a thing we weren't ever meant to see or know. I heard the thunk of it hitting the road. A more rational man, the sort I'd considered myself to be in that morning, would have assumed the adrenaline of the accident had caused hallucinations. A more rational man would have stopped the car, got out, called an ambulance, and checked on the twisted figure in the road. I didn't stop to think. I slammed the accelerator and drove like the devil himself had come to take me to hell. I didn't dip below 40 until I came to a halt outside the pub. My heart didn't stop pounding until I was inside and I could see people in there. One of them was a bloke I knew, another volunteer from the NBA who'd worked with me on a couple of bothies in the area a year or two back. When he saw me all sweaty and pale, he ordered a lager for me and asked me what was what. I told him between sobs and coughs. "The bothy up on the hill, yeah?" He lit up a cigarette. "I'll have a word with the owner and it'll be shut down." I opened my mouth to tell Pete it was probably kids and me getting superstitious in my middle age. He shook his head. "First time anything like this has happened this far south. You were lucky, Mike. Seems to like places that people go alone. Bothies, woods, cabins. What, like some kind of serial killer?" He gave me a look and said in an even lower tone, "Come on, Mike. You think it's some nutter? You're the first person to have seen it up close, you know. Thank God. Thank God you didn't talk to it, you lucky son of a bitch." My heart fluttered. My skin tingled. Why? What happens when people talk to it?
How did he talk to it?
You don't know. You're probably the world's authority now. He gave a short, rough laugh. "All I've heard is from a mate up in the Western Isles is that sometimes a camper will talk about a strange person they've seen out in the wilderness. He says the ones that describe talking to it tend to have a habit of disappearing off the radar. You know what I mean?" I was cold. My skin was pebbled with goosebumps and my throat nearly closed up. The pub lights seemed to dim as I struggled to suck in a good breath. And in my ear, I thought I heard the wind again, except this time it didn't whistle. This time it said, "Hey mate, you all right there?" That's what he said to him.
Ah.
The end.